The following discussion is not necessarily the views of all involved. The goal is to start open and honest discussion in a Christian worldview. Like all things, weigh what you hear with what you know and join us in our pursuit for the truth. Enjoy the podcast.
What was the last 5 minutes? That was rough.
Oh, you mean the sword that you killed Goliath with that's sitting right behind the ephod wrapped in a cloth? You better not take it.
And the earth is only 6,000 years old, right?
No.
That's what this means.
No.
All right, welcome to the Second Rate Saints podcast. I'm one of your hosts here, Caleb. To my left is...
I'm Joshua. To my left is...
I'm Joel. And to my left...
It's me, Caleb again. We've gone full circle. We are missing both Stuart and Colton. Very, very sad times. But the show must go on. Joel, what does the show do on the internet?
Yeah, we got a website, secondratessaints.com. We've got an email, secondratessaints@gmail.com. And we've got Instagram and Twitter, which is also under the name of Second Rate Saints. If you want to keep an eye on what we're doing and are excited to see what other projects Second Rate Saints takes on as a group, then definitely make sure to follow along. We'll see where this thing ends up in a year. Cool.
Yeah. So because I'm halfway through way too many books, and I'm not actually very good at finishing the books that I read. Joel, what have you read?
Since I don't have anything, we'll get Joel to do it. So, mine's not even a book. Mine is a lecture that I listened to on Audible in the Great Courses series, which is kind of awesome. And it's Cities of the Ancient World. And I find a lot of times when I'm doing context studies for a lot of Old Testament books, especially like early Canaanite stuff, is super helpful for kind of like fleshing out my view of the world. In the Old Testament. But so I listened through this. It's like a 13-hour lecture or something like that.
Great Courses are great.
Great Courses have been really good. I also got through their History of Secret Societies one, but I'm not going to talk about that today. It was really good, actually. That one was awesome as well. But I think, the Cities of the Ancient World, which is by the lecturer Stephen L. Tuck from Miami University.
So in going over a city, what would they cover? Just as much as we know about it, like culture,
Yeah, so his
economics?
standard for a city is any group of buildings connected by culture, religion, or economy. Yeah, it's super interesting.
That's so vague.
It is super vague, but he makes a pretty bold claim at the beginning of his lecture, especially talking about Sumerian societies, that the first reason to group together was not necessarily for food, and it was not necessarily for the economy. It was for religion.
Not even defense.
No, it wouldn't be defense either. But it seems that defense would be a byproduct of that they might attribute to their god. It's super interesting how that works.
Fair enough.
That there was almost the mentality of protection from having a holy site may have actually increased their defense, which is so cool.
So religion's the bootlegger for defense.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, that the belief in something was better than just nomadic nothing.
Or like in Age of Empires 2, when you have a holy site or relics in your city, it gives you buffs.
I doubt that's what his source was, but I'm sure it follows the same kind
but
of
I
thinking.
bet Age of Empires 2 source was this guy.
Well, that was one of my biggest takeaways was just the realization that religion played a larger part in the grouping of humanity early on in history than I thought they did. Definitely makes a lot more sense in like a Canaanite context, where their cities would be built around temples, that there would be nothing in their city not related to that religious practice.
Right. And that even lines up with, like we covered it in our Tower of Babel episode, how the religious structure would go up first.
Yeah.
And then the rest would follow around.
Now, he's not in any way a biblical scholar or a theologian of any kind. He's got his PhD in history. And that's where he spends all of his time. So you might not, like in listening to these lectures, and I would say any lecture that's not from a Christian perspective, you might have to draw some of your own lines there. right? Like he's going to present evidence that may still complement the Christian worldview, but is not intended to.
Well, that's one of the things I've noticed with the Great Courses is sometimes, especially even their stuff on explicitly Christian stuff, they'll bring in
Bart
scholars.
Ehrman
Yeah,
or
Bart
whatever.
Ehrman for your New Testament stuff. But then every now and then they pull in like some Catholic lecturer for the Old Testament that I've been listening to through the Great Courses. I think both of us are listening to that.
That was a good one. There was another one I listened to on Luke Timothy Johnson. Is that his name?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, who's he was a Benedictine monk. That
Was he a monk?
yeah, at some point, and he stopped. Like he left the
Oh.
the I forget what the term is for where they stay, but it's not a monastery. It's something slightly more relaxed than that. But yeah, he does a lot of writing on Paul, and so he had a lecture with the Great Courses. So sometimes they have really good guys, but I would always recommend looking up kind of who's behind the lecture before you start listening to it.
Fair enough.
Yeah, sorry, this isn't supposed to be about that specifically, but more about ancient cities. Walls are awesome. Makes the story of Jericho a lot more again, more tangible when you realize how everything's laid out. Even when we get into kind of our section of Samuel tonight, it's really helpful for me to visualize what, cities at the turn of the Bronze Age look like, right? Just, have those mindsets. It goes over a little bit of Nineveh's construction, which helped us for
That could be
Jonah
fascinating.
episode, talking about how the walls were structured. And
How tall were they?
I don't remember how tall the walls were at Nineveh. Do you?
Darn.
Go with Xenophon's description because, it's
150 feet tall.
Yeah.
Which account is cooler? Well, that's obviously the real one.
Another one I thought about, or never thought about, realized while listening to this lecture, is how many cities kind of disappeared because if you're making bricks out of mud, we don't know what the first Babylonian Empire looked like because they built everything out of mud bricks. And one of the significant parts of the Tower of Babel is that they wouldn't know how to fire bricks in the same way that the scripture tells us they did. So there's like a discrepancy there that we don't know what the original Babylonian Empire looks like. And we really can only go off the stories of scripture, even though they tell us inaccurately how it was built.
Well, yeah, and that depends. We went over this in our Tower of Babel episode, which if you haven't heard that, recommend go give that a listen.
And that's if the historical record so far has ruled that out.
Yeah.
Because it might be that in 50, 30, whatever years that we do find.
Kind of.
Yeah.
It is kind of like if we didn't. The fact that there is no bricks from that period is very indicative that,
Yes.
Yeah.
No, all I mean is that like we haven't searched everywhere yet.
This is true.
So yes, there's a danger in not trusting scripture or seeing archaeology in this sense, or lectures like early development of cities as disproving the Bible. And I don't think it's a good way to look at it. And I think it does help build the world around the text. But I think an example of a terrible biblical archaeologist that has only set us back is Ron Wyatt. Right? We can talk about that all the time. Like faking evidence in the Red Sea is not helpful for the cause of Christianity. No. So be wary whatever you read. There's going to be a tinge of bias to it. Yeah. Just be careful what you go for ancient history.
Yeah, no, the only example I would use as the wait and see what history has to show is the Bible being the only record of the Hittite Empire until the 70s, and then they just found a whole empire.
Yeah. The Hittite Empire is so cool. I'm listening to another great courses series right now called Empires Before Alexander.
Yeah.
So good. Sargon the Great. Yeah.
Pretty great.
Awesome.
It's
Yeah.
a bit brutal.
Speaking of empires, not much of an empire.
Let's talk about a tiny kingdom.
Tiny kingdom of Israel, the Empire of David. But before we get there,
yes,
we're going over his rise and following through First Samuel, right now. Josh, what did we do previously on Samuel?
Previously on Samuel, so David goes back from the area of Naioth where he was hiding with Samuel, and goes back to Saul's house and talks with Jonathan, and
Takes all his clothes, but like in a bro way.
That happens. That happens with
That was the chapter
Goliath.
before.
and he talks with Jonathan about how, hey, why is your dad trying to kill me? Why is he trying to hunt me down? And Jonathan's like, I don't know what you're talking about. He would never do that. He's promised me that he wouldn't try to kill you anymore. And David's like, well, he is, and we need to do something about that. So they devise a plan on how to test Saul's heart at the next New Moon Festival dinner at their house, which David has to attend. But he doesn't, to see how Saul will react. And Jonathan and him devise a plan on if he acts harshly or if he acts gracefully towards David not being there. And they set up a system on a way for Jonathan to be able to tell David without letting anybody know that he's telling David that the outcome, by firing some arrows and getting a servant boy to go grab the arrows. And then the servant boy would tell David what's going on. And so they find out that Jonathan finds out that Saul is still trying to kill David. He outs himself in the court. Saul even tries to kill his own son. And Jonathan is livid, weeps by himself because of his father's attempt and heart, breaking of promise, breaking of trust, showing of how evil he is.
I think it's how much shame he has done to David.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the thrust of that text, where it's like David's not even sad at like his own relationship to his father. He's like, why is my dad being this guy?
Yeah.
Why is he doing this to David?
Well, I think it's important that the last thing that pulls Jonathan and Saul apart is Saul. It's not David. Right?
Yeah.
It's not David pulling Saul away from the dynastic family. It is
Saul himself. Yeah. And so David and Jonathan weep together. They say their goodbyes, and David leaves. And that leaves us where we are today.
And in the secret message originally, and then they talk and whatnot. But he does so, hey, leave quickly, run, like urgent. You need to get out of here now.
Yeah. And that was 1 Samuel 20, and we are now doing 1 Samuel 21 and 22. So I shall start reading. Then David came to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest, and Ahimelech came to meet David, trembling, and said to him, why are you alone, and no one with you? And David said to Ahimelech the priest, the king has charged me with a matter and said to me, let no one know anything of the matter about which I send you and with which I have charged you. I have made an appointment with the young men for such and such a place. Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever is here. And the priest answered David, I have no common bread at hand, but there is the holy bread if the young men have kept themselves from women. And David answered the priest, truly, women have been kept from us always when I go on expedition. The vessels of the young men are holy even when it is an ordinary journey. How much more today will their vessels be holy? So the priests gave him the holy bread, for there was no bread there but the bread of the presence, which is removed from before the Lord to be placed by hot bread on the day it is taken away. Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord. His name was Doeg, the Edomite, the chief of Saul's herdsmen. Then David said to Ahimelech, then have you not here a spear or a sword at hand? For I have brought neither my sword nor my weapon with me, because the king's business required haste. And the priest said, the sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom you struck down in the valley of Elah, behold, it is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you take it, for there is none but that here. And David said, there is none like that. Give it to me.
That's so cool.
It's
Just the giant sword.
yeah.
That's so cool.
So there's a lot going on there. Those 9 verses.
There is.
A lot of people in there too. A lot of name drops. Nob. That's not a person, but
Nob.
I think it's funny.
Yep.
So with Shiloh getting overrun in 612 or 621, with the loss of the arc, right? It appears as though Shiloh kind of gets wiped off, not wiped off the face of the earth, because it does come back, but it's not the center of like cultic devotion. And Nob appears to kind of take that place.
So Shiloh, you're talking about like where Saul offered he offered up sacrifice to Shiloh, didn't he? Or am I thinking of something else?
Shiloh's the place where the
May
tabernacle
have,
was.
but the tabernacle was there before they lost it.
At the
And
very
then-
beginning of the book, where Eli
6:21.
raised Samuel.
Yeah. It also, because Isaiah 10:32 makes a comment about how invaders would stop at Nob to shake their fist at Jerusalem. Gives kind of an indication, so it's really close to Jerusalem somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, so we don't know where Nob is, like on a map.
There's been different sites that are proposed, but it's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
But-
Yeah, I mentioned in the last episode, like when we were nearing the end, that this is a very vivid scene in my mind from that old David movie.
Yeah.
I did bring that up, and that for some reason it's just a claymore.
Again, all
I
I can
want to
picture-
bring that up.
All I can picture is a modern, like,
Yeah.
anti-personal claymore,
Yeah.
like a bomb.
Oh
So,
no, that's so good.
all I can picture is David pulls out a claymore.
Yeah.
So, Nob was not only like it's close to the city of Jerusalem, it's also served as a sanctuary city for the descendants of Aaron.
Yes, because it's the one Levites go to if they've committed a crime.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's a natural place to move from Shiloh to Nob because all of Aaron's descendants are the ones that run the tabernacle.
So Nob is just the Vatican.
Now it is.
Is that a bad thing to say?
The
Where they
audience
have
can't- the
different
audience
laws
can't-
that you can't persecute the priests that go there?
The audience can't see my face of disappointment.
I think
Just
they
know
could
that
hear
it's
it.
there. Yeah, you could hear it. The silence spoke volumes.
So it's not the Vatican.
Yes.
Yeah. But it is an important
But it's-
place.
It's just a place priests go
It's
to
not-
get away from legal repercussions.
It's not
Yeah.
ordinary place versus Vatican. There may be other places.
There's somewhere in between, but I'm a man of extremes.
Yeah. So David shows up to the temple with a group of men.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has soldiers with him, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Verse 1, why are you alone and
Okay.
no one with
No,
you?
but when he eats, the priest asks, "Have the men you're with?"
Yeah, because he
been with
makes
women?"
reference to, I'm going to meet men at such and
Yes.
such a place.
Yes.
Okay, now I understand.
Yes. He's going to meet men.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, it's cave time.
No, well, that comes shortly.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So
There is a
anyway, so
significant time
he
jump,
shows up. Okay, so he shows up, and it's just him. And there's two reasons, at least two proposed reasons from what I could find of why Ahimelech comes out and he's like, "Oh, hey, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Hi." One of is this is David who's killed thousands of people. and
Well,
he's a
Saul
young man.
killed thousands. He killed tens of
Tens of
thousands.
Okay, you get the please.
Listen to the
I'm
propaganda.
not. It's God's word.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's a warrior machine. And he's the one whom Saul has put in charge of the men of war, right? That is in 18:5. So he's killed countless men, all that kind of stuff. And here he is just approaching alone.
Yeah.
That alone is kind of horrifying.
Mhm.
I'm actually not too sympathetic towards that one, but fair enough.
Yeah, that could be a reason.
The other one is that Ahimelech kind of knows that there's tension
Mhm.
going on in, let's say, the royal court, right?
He knows he's about to commit treason.
Maybe.
Okay.
He might know that, and he might just know that there's tension and he doesn't know what's happening with that tension. He might know that basically Jonathan has forced his dad to openly acknowledge in front of the court that, hey, the cat's out of the bag. David's going to try to take the kingdom from me and my children, and blah, 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 blah. And Jonathan's on David's side. And it's all like the sham is like the cat's out of the bag. Ahimelech may know that. He may not. Regardless. So if Ahimelech knows that David, if there's tension in the courtroom, David's on one side, Jonathan might be on that side too, and Saul's over here, and he may know that Saul's servant, Doeg, is there and is witnessing to anything that happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
That may be the other reason, is he's like, oh, there's tension. Here comes the one side, and I know that there's a spy.
Yeah. Yeah. And Doeg, the chief herdsman, there's three kind of ways. So the title is chief of shepherds. But that can mean mercenary. That can mean a runner, like a spy runner that sends information back and forth to the king.
Okay.
And that can also mean like an administrative guy who could be a scribe. The guy who is listed as writing down the Dead Sea Scrolls is listed as chief of shepherds.
I also read it somewhere, although that is not the literal translation, that they
Mhm.
made the argument how it's in reference to like kind of inner guard type stuff. And that would make sense. He's a mercenary. David hires mercenaries to be his bodyguards and kind of his most tightly knit men.
So when they say shepherd of shepherds, I mean they're looking out for the shepherd being the king.
People, there's so many ways to take
that's
that word.
the idea, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that any one of those things kind of could be there. Either way, we do know he's a Moabite.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And he's loyal to Saul.
Yeah. Because in most
He's an Edomite, isn't he?
Edomite.
Sorry. Moabites come later in the story.
Okay.
Because most mercenaries to a king were often not the people from the kingdom that they ruled.
Yeah.
Because, same with David's mighty men. Most of them are not Israeli.
Well, isn't that how there was a speculation of that when we went through Goliath's story, that he wasn't a Philistine. He was just living in Gath.
That's going to come up.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably good to go over who Ahimelech is or was. High priest, probably. People make claims that he's tied to Eli, and I think that makes sense. You can draw some lines there. But yeah, he'd be some sort of distant relative of Eli.
Interesting.
Not direct, obviously.
Just because of Levitical heritage stuff, is there? Okay.
Yeah, that's the connection there.
Yeah.
And Shiloh, is Shiloh where Samuel starts off? Yeah.
Shiloh is the place where Hannah and
whatever his name is.
Oh, I forget his name.
No one remembers Samuel's dad.
Goes to and Eli's there, and then that's where they're at Shiloh.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. Is that where
But
the temple is said to be?
Samuel runs his stuff, he's out of Ramah, which is where his family was from. Yeah. Another cool thing is what was next? There was the purity thing of eating of the bread of presence, because in Leviticus that bread which was set on the table outside the most holy place is supposed to be replaced by, so there's 12 loaves of bread, one loaf of bread for each tribe of Israel, and that bread is supposed to be replaced every Sabbath. And after that time period, the priest and his family are to eat it, and that's the most important meal of their duty that they get.
Gotcha.
And then after that, it's the meat from the sacrifices that they eat, that they get a portion of, because they're not allowed to work the same way that everybody else is. So they get portions of sacrifices and stuff like that.
Yep.
So they're supposed to eat that after the week, which means they're not getting it this time. And David's taking it. And because he's high priest, he's allowed to give it.
He's not really, though. And it makes a big deal out of it in the New Testament. Right? I read one commentator kind of go, there were probably development of ideas on protecting the bread of the presence.
Yeah.
And that may have been not. It might be.
So the practice itself may have been malleable at this time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's that, or if you go with the route that it was not malleable, this is in effect showing you how Eli and his family's corruption is still going on, but it worked to God's benefit.
Yeah.
But
I don't get that.
yeah.
Do you think there's like a subtext of this is meant to be for those who do God's work, and now that's David? Or do you think it's not that deep?
I mean, it goes along with the idea of king priest, but that gets developed way later in the later prophets after the exile with Jeshua.
I don't think so. At least not. I'm not super convinced of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was just wondering if you thought there was that much imagery going on there.
Yeah. The ephod that the sword's hidden behind.
Mm-hmm.
Is it special, Josh?
So
is it the same ephod that's worn by a priest?
So fun fact, the Ark of the Covenant's not in the tabernacle.
They don't say it's in the tabernacle.
No, because David brings it to the tabernacle later when he's king.
Oh, yeah.
It's still outside of that guy's farm after the battle when it gets brought back.
You think it's still outside?
Well, that's where David grabs it from.
That's where David grabs it from.
And he brings it to Jerusalem.
Yeah. And so it's possible that the ephod, the commentators and the historical work by Walton, Matthews, and Chavalis say that the ephod is probably the most important relic right now, like holy piece, being the piece of the high priest. So it's probably on the stand in the room, not being used, and that's why the sword is there. And the reason the sword is there is for the same reason the ark was in the temple of Dagon, as a as a holy relic taken from a defeated champion.
Because it's a demon sword.
That's pretty cool. Well, giant sword. Yeah, demon sword. I
Yeah.
get it.
Here's the thing. In Judges 8:27, and Gideon made an ephod and put it in his city of Ophrah, and all of Israel whored after it, and it became the snare to Gideon and to his family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Other commentators, such as Klein, this would be the word biblical commentator, would go, the ephod behind which the sword was hidden was not a linen garment, but rather a divine image. And then he references that verse in Judges, or perhaps an oracle producing article associated elsewhere with Ahijah and the brother of Elimelech.
Yeah.
So he just traces that ephod directly from
It's
Judges.
just like idolatry. That's a hard sell for me.
That's so cool. I'm putting that in whatever I read about idolatry.
But I'm not, because I already am kind of weirded out, and I don't like I do think that there's something going on with the icon or the idols that Michael used to pretend as though David was in bed.
Yeah.
We already know there's some unhealthy idolatry stuff going on in Israel at this time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I'm more of the, and we'll disagree with this, but I'm more of the line that it's the actual ephod created for the high priest, but that it's because of its higher religious status now, because the Ark of the Covenant's not there. And then having the sword behind it.
Yeah, so you would keep a holy relic and some kind of
in the same way with
in the same way you
Dagon.
would like the Vatican or something.
Wait, is there a basement underneath the tabernacle?
Yeah, that's where the ark is.
Oh,
And the hot water heater.
Yeah, but okay. So what's cool is David gets the sword now.
Yes, he has the demon sword.
That's so cool.
Yes, Goliath.
Should I not call it that? Just because?
Well, now we need to explain what Nephilim are.
They're demons. Anyways, let's keep going. And Goliath is one of them because he's really tall and can hold 900 pounds of armor, and he's not blind. Anyways, let's keep going.
Yeah, so David gets Goliath's sword, the person he defeated at the battle, which made him greater than Saul.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a problem with David lying here? Because he does lie.
He lies. Does he meet with some men and give them the food?
That's not explained. because
right.
he is not arranged to meet anybody, like he said, and he's not sent on a mission, like he said.
You're right.
Additionally, there might be if
He also-
Ahimelech is worried about what's his name, Doeg, then David telling him this story is kind of like that, like, hey, here's a plausible deniability story.
Yeah.
Right? And also, I think it's Klein, again, is the one who points out that it's like, why does Ahimelech tell David that he's like, oh yeah, the sword that you killed Goliath in that valley, because you were awesome. Yeah, it's here. Unless Ahimelech is kind of like, hey, Noeg, don't underestimate David, because if Noeg's just there, and we know Noeg from next chapter, from which we're going to cover shortly, is pretty good with the sword too, and it might just be a kind of a nod to Noeg, and it's just like, yeah, hey, don't mess around with David, because hey, remember he killed Goliath and he just had a sling.
Or what it is because they both know who Doeg is. Because David's got to know who Doeg is.
Yeah.
Right? It's that David is talking with Ahimelech in this like plausible deniability, but also this lie. Because then like he's like, oh, I was sent here by the king. Yeah. And like, you know, and then Ahimelech's like, David's like, oh, I'm going to need some food for these other men. It's actually for my travel. And then the Ahimelech's like, oh, do you want the sword that you killed Goliath with? And he's like, because you don't have a weapon on you, because you're going to be in danger.
I mean, David was the one who was like, hey, do you have a spear, a sword? Do you
Yes.
have anything here?
Yeah.
He does do that with the bread too. It's just like, hey, do you have bread or anything really?
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like he's gone to the nearest place where he can get stuff that he's going to need for a travel and defense. And Ahimelech is giving it to him, but in a way that appears plausible deniability, and he's supporting David.
Yeah. Or he's just worried because David's a scary guy that kills people.
Yeah.
And he's just kind of innocently, like, not arrogantly, what's it called? Ignorantly, just, oh yeah, sure, here you go. Which is also a reading.
It is. But I do like oh, you mean the sword that you killed Goliath with in that valley that's sitting right behind the ephod wrapped in a cloth?
You better not take it.
And then David's like, that's the one.
That's the one.
It kind of sounds like video game instructions, like a little bit like a tutorial.
Oh yeah, no, this is the beginning of Legend of Zelda where it's like, don't go out.
It's dangerous to go alone.
Yeah.
Take this.
Take this. And then the priest's like, there's nothing like it. And David's like, you're right. There's nothing like it. Yeah. Okay, that's cool. Next bit.
The fun one.
And David rose and fled that day from Saul and went to Achish, the king of Gath. And the servants of Achish said to him, is not this David, the king of the land? Did they not sing to one another of him in dances? Saul has struck down his thousands and David his 10,000s. And David took these words to heart and was much afraid of Achish, the king of Gath. So he changed his behavior before them and pretended to be insane in their hands and made marks on the doors and the gates and let his spittle run down his beard. Then Achish said to his servants, behold, you see the man is mad. Why then have you brought him to me? Do I lack madmen? That you have brought this fellow to behave as a madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house?
You know how I talked about Victor Yoon in the last episode?
Yeah.
Yeah, he did this. He mentions it in his story. He goes like, I was on a mission from God and David did it, so I decided I was going to be insane. And it's like, oh, that's awesome.
Did it work for him?
It worked.
Okay, because that's interesting. Because how did he behave insane?
Oh, he just acted incoherent and wouldn't tell correct stories and things like that.
Okay.
He's basically he was being interrogated and tortured, so it's like, it wasn't hard to look insane.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So, do you have something to say on this?
There's quite a bit to say. I think there's a reason. I think there's a reasonable articulation for why David would go into the Philistines, and I think it kind of fits in with why does he go there? And then all of a sudden he's like, oh no, turns out the people that I had to kill a bunch of them. I only had to kill 100, but I killed 200 and then mutilated their corpses. For a hand in marriage for Saul's daughter. Turns out they don't like me. Wow. So I think it's reasonable to articulate that David may have made a calculated risk by going into Philistine territory.
Yeah.
Where Saul would be scared to follow him.
Yes.
And then his calculated risk goes bad. And it's just like, oh, but they found me. And so what is he going to do? He's going to pretend to be insane. Yeah. Which gets into something that you were talking about, how it's like.
So David is going into Gath because another cool, interesting note is Gath is where Goliath is from, which is interesting. And then also the going of there, like you're saying, to the Philistines, to the place where Saul's afraid, is also maybe, if he works with them, because he killed their champion and because he has been so effective against them, and he's saying, hey, I'll ally with you against Saul, that's both a benefit to the Philistines and his way to become king.
See, maybe that competes with my articulation, which is fine.
Yeah. The other thing is the going insane, Joel, this is super cool. I found this out, is the same word used here is in all the prophets later on, is the same word used for when somebody is in the Holy Spirit.
What I read is sometimes, not all.
Yeah. And
for like ecstatic speech stuff.
And so the acting insane is interesting because the Philistines and a bunch of the other countries around that area, if somebody was acting crazy like they were the messenger of the gods, they weren't allowed to kill them. And so they wouldn't be allowed in like polite society.
Yeah, you were ostracized, but you couldn't be
killed, which meant that's like David was trying to get into the group, but he'll be satisfied with just not being killed. Which meant that if Saul tried to go into the Philistine lands, the Philistines would not let Saul kill him because he's a messenger of the gods.
Yeah, but I also think that if Saul just came into Philistine lands, it would be open war anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he would be with all the other men that are crazy. And that's why the Gath guys.
Well, there's also like also like an offhanded comment where he's just like, I already have enough crazy people in my city. What's wrong with you? Don't bring him in here.
Gath is so funny. So this is cool. We kind of mentioned this in the Goliath episode, but David is becoming Goliath.
Yeah.
He has his sword and he's an exile in Philistine lands. Which is what Goliath was. That's what his name meant. Exile. And he's the one that Saul is afraid of.
And he is empowered, quote unquote, by a spirit.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So, yeah, the insanity could just be, it's not Holy Spirit, but
he's faking it.
He's faking it.
He's faking, okay, acting like he is a prophet.
Yeah. So he's lied twice now for safety.
He may be banging on the doors also, or spitting on them, either way.
Oh, yeah.
Also, question. When you picture David, do you picture him with a beard?
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
I don't.
Neither do I.
Yeah.
And yet the text here says that he just
Do you think that's because in the West we often think of Aragorn when we think of David?
Doesn't Aragorn have a bad beard, like a short beard?
Does he?
I think so.
No, when they're going to Mordor,
I don't know. It's just Michelangelo's David doesn't have a beard, and so I don't know. I've never pictured him with a beard.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Okay.
Something I found out about the Philistine king there.
Yes.
He said he might not be a Philistine king.
Yeah. Okay, so I found something on that too. Say it.
Yeah, he's probably just a Canaanite vassal or possibly a commander over a region.
Is it because of the Assyrian text?
I don't know the exact reason for it. I just know that there's like a subservience to him.
Okay.
That he's not kind of top dog. He's like, he could possibly be in a similar position to David.
Yeah.
Where he's also the king over those men. And he basically switches sides completely. which is
Interesting.
Well, there's another thing with him using the term, calling David king of the land.
Yeah.
There's several kind of notes in conjunction with their popular, like the knowledge of the popular lyric of, David's superiority in comparison to Saul's. They may be calling him king to indicate that even they have seen and observed his like political growth, right, against Saul, and like it's a projection thing. Or alternatively, and I favor this one a little more, they could simply be calling him a chieftain / like leader,
which is
of
the
men.
same argument of what's his name, Akish.
Akish.
I can never pronounce it right. As him being a chieftain,
Yeah.
Or
and still being king technically.
So this might-
But the author or editor may be drawing on that idea and then blowing it to a larger proportion to prove the theological point.
yeah.
Okay.
Being like
see
the Jews see it, the Hebrews see it, and even the Philistines are seeing, or at least expect David's kingship, and yet Saul's the one who's
Oh,
holding on.
this is okay. Thought in real time. David's ark leaving the Philistine, leaving the land and coming back has to be mimicking the ark leaving and coming back.
I don't know if it has to be.
Oh, do you think it? Hold on. Does it also mimic the people of Abraham? They go into service into a foreign land,
Yeah, so
come back.
so that goes into Peugeot's
Okay.
Jonathan Peugeot's.
Jonathan Peugeot's
We can come
idea
up
of
with it, you
like
notice
going
it.
into exile and coming back with more.
Yeah.
Like that's the purpose of exile or going into the wilderness is going out and coming back with more.
Yeah.
But what I mean is like in Samuel, you have the people reject the commands of the Lord to work with the ark properly, and so it leaves, defeats his enemies, and comes back. And David is now going to.
It doesn't leave.
Yes, gets taken, and in this case, got driven out of the land.
Okay, if it is an object purely in line with God's will, then can it actively leave?
Like,
you know what I
in the
mean?
same way that because of providence, all things that can occur can be said to be the active purposes of God.
Yeah, this is gonna get into
So-
something.
Anyway,
I just realized how deep that was, so I kind of took my foot out of it a little bit.
Okay, so the other thing is Akish. There's no record of him in extra biblical writing, but there is a record in the Assyrian texts of their logs of a king of Ekron named Ikasu, son of Pina. Same with Akish, king of Ekron, son of Pina. And so it's possible that that's just a difference in like writing or like an alternate spelling of his name or whatever.
Yeah.
But if he's in the records of the Assyrian lists of kings that they own, that he might be a vassal of,
makes sense.
makes sense. Same way that Manasseh, king of the Jews, Judah, is in the Assyrian text as a vassal for them later on. And so that goes to the point you're saying with that he's a vassal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would track.
So, yeah. Next section.
Yeah, there's some people that make the whole argument from Psalm 34 is a description of.
Is that I
David
lift
at
my
this
eyes up
time.
to the hills?
No, that's the taste and see that the Lord is good. I will bless the Lord at all times. Klein makes a big deal out of it.
That's the eating of the bread?
No, that's the he draws a distinction of how he escaped. Read Psalm 34 for yourself if you really want come across
You
that.
just don't buy it at all?
I just don't buy it at all. I just want to mention it because I saw it in several commentaries, and so if you really find that interesting, go read Psalm 34 and tell me what you think.
Okay. Next. David departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, they went down there to him. And everyone who was in distress and everyone who was in debt and everyone who was bitter in soul gathered to him. And he became commander over them. And there were with him about 400 men. And David went from there to Mizpah of Moab. And he said to the king of Moab, "Please let my father and my mother stay with you till I know what God will do for me." And he left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed with him all the time that David was in the stronghold. Then the prophet of Gad said to David, do not remain in the stronghold. Depart and go to the land of Judah. So David departed and went into the forests of Hereth. Yeah. Okay. So the cool thing I found about this is Moab is the historical birthplace of Ruth, who's David's ancestor.
Yep.
And there are 2 other recordings in ancient Near East texts where a ruler or a man on the run brings his family to the birthplace of his people for safety. And so it's possible that David, the reason he goes to Moab is not just because of any guy, but it's because he's appealing to his ancestry, heritage in Moab.
I think it's more likely that he's betting on their equal distrust of Saul.
I think that works. I think they work together.
Because he flattens Moab after he's in control.
Absolutely.
Which means that like the whole like blood ties thing doesn't really, in my opinion.
Unless that's because he's called to by God.
Okay.
Like he destroys God's enemies because he's supposed to. But that for right now, the same way that he's lying to get food and weapons, and the same way he's lying to.
Do you think God's okay with him lying to do that?
God is completely absent with talking about it. So there's that.
Okay.
He doesn't say that. He doesn't bless it, and he doesn't point it out.
Okay. Sorry, I just really wanted to ask you that.
What do we think the prophet of Gad is doing, hanging out? Is it weird that he's in Moab, or is it just weird to me?
I think that the way the one commentator put it was that's God pulling David back into the land.
Yeah.
He's saying like, no, like yeah, you need to flee from Saul, whatever, but like you can't stay here. This is momentary. Go back.
So is Gad is in Israel though?
Yes.
So he
it's
would
on the
have
edge.
left Israel and then went into
Moab.
and been, man, I love prophets in the Old Testament. They're so like weird mystery men that walk around. It's so good.
It's everything that Joel wants to be.
Honestly, yeah. I just can't find any robes for cheap enough.
Do you think
driving around
Samuel
in a camper van in a robe, going around going?
Do you think Samuel
Serve God?
You must return to your homeland. I get it. Yeah.
Do you think Samuel and the prophet of Gad like hung out on Tuesdays or like get coffee every once in a while? Or do you think the prophet of Gad was in Samuel's prophet school in the trees?
I mean, I would hope
He's
so.
in the trees.
Yeah. When
The
Saul's
prophets
there,
are in the trees.
To me, it's even weirder to think of the prophets not as like wizards wandering the wastelands, but as like modern day pastors. It's almost weirder. It's like your small group connect leader is not really who I.
Do you think they
imagine to
meet
be.
between cities where no one sees them and have a lunch?
I don't know if the connection between like small group leaders and pastors is prophet. That'd be scribe.
Oh yeah, probably. But like he had mentioned, do you think they went out for coffee?
Oh,
And that was like that's kind of funny to think of.
fair enough.
Yeah. Oh hey, how's your district doing?
Well, I killed everybody, so
I chopped this guy up into little bits.
Yeah. Well,
I was trying to use discernment.
I just deposed our king.
I have the spiritual gift of discernment, so I cut him into pieces. Interesting.
You're talking verbally? No.
No.
It didn't say verbally in the leadership email.
What was the last 5 minutes? That was rough.
I blacked out. Anyways, what are you saying?
Back to the text.
The stronghold that it's mentioned is probably just his cave near Adullam before.
He's caveman.
That's a masculine thing to do. Walk into a cave and call it your stronghold.
Yeah.
I had one of those as a kid. Anyways, continue.
So also another fun thing is David's band of men, the one that all like gather around him. So like there's his family, but then there's all the other guys, these like discontents and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Are probably like they're foreign men, but they're also some of them are probably men from Israel that are fleeing from Saul for different reasons as well. And the specific word for them are called Habiru, which are mercenaries and men who saw an opportunity to overthrow Saul.
I just like to think that David's older brother that was talking down to him at the battle with Goliath is now just like, yeah, man, we're with you.
Well, no, just imagine like he comes by, like they all come to him to be saved and go to Moab, and he's walking around with Goliath's sword on his back.
That's so cool.
And he's now this like warrior that has led Israel to countless victories. And his brother was like, hey, why don't you get a real job?
Go back to the sheep.
Go back to the sheep.
Keep beating up bears.
What is this? What is a word? What is wrong with you?
That's
It's so good.
Yeah.
The Habiru you mentioned. So if we're
Yeah.
going to tie it back into the early cities, or actually it's not, it was the empires before Alexander I was listening to. He makes a case for the Habiru, as mentioned there, is also mentioned in a stele about the Hittite Empire, and that while they had vassals that were around Israel, the smaller Canaanite towns would actually, in rebellion against the Hittite Empire, align with smaller shepherd communities, possibly being assimilated into Israel at the time of the United Monarchy.
Oh, okay.
So these people could have already been rebelling against another empire before Israel was even founded as having a king,
Yeah.
which is very cool. So it could be that David joined the bandits in the foothills. Like these could have already been an existing
That's
group.
definitely it.
Yeah.
Like these guys are all.
But they're attested to in exterior sources.
Yes.
Which is very cool.
Yeah. Okay. The next section. Now Saul heard that David was discovered and that the men who were with him, Saul was sitting at Gibeah under the tamarisk tree on the height with his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing about him. And Saul said to his servants who stood about him, hear now, people of Benjamin, will the son of Jesse give every one of your fields and vineyards? Will give every one of you fields and vineyards? Will he make you all commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds? That all of you have conspired against me. No one discloses to me when my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse. None of you is sorry for me or discloses to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait as is this day, as at this day. Then answered Doeg the Edomite who stood with the servants of Saul, I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob to Ahimelech the son of Ahitub. And he inquired of the Lord for him and gave him provisions and gave him the sword of Goliath, the Philistine.
So interesting. He's called a Philistine there, but whatever, we know.
Yeah.
Nobody likes a tattletale.
At least
Okay.
his name is symbolizing exile.
2 points.
Yes.
Also, ESV says, what does it say? A high place?
Mm-hmm.
Tree on the heights. Another translation is a high place.
Yes.
Which I think is continuing on with the weird allusion to idolatry stuff going on here. That's kind of weirdly in the background. At least that's my thought.
Well,
additionally, it's funny that he always has a spear with him. And additionally, so I guess 3 points. It seems like ever since the tension broke out in the open court, even his advisors and whatnot are just not saying anything.
Yeah.
And even Saul just openly acknowledges, Joel has mentioned that it's first it's Michael that he's brought over, David's brought over into his camp. Then it's Jonathan. And now to a certain degree, it's even just the higher nobles.
It's the administration
that he's brought over.
Yeah.
And he's just and Saul's he's surrounded by people that won't really serve him because they're just,
Yep.
David's, but he can't kill them. They're they're the elite,
Yeah.
right? And so all of his, let's say the court, the nobles are just not saying any information. So Doeg breaks the ice.
Doeg,
sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah. So he tells him what's up because it seems like Doeg is his faithful. Like he's the worm tongue to Saruman. Like the one guy that he has. Yeah. But also, so underneath the tamarisk tree is on the high place. High place doesn't always denote evil, like bad worship place.
No, it doesn't.
Because
It just denotes place of worship, doesn't
just
it?
denotes place of worship. Okay. But when the temple gets formed and wherever the blah, 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 if it's not the place God designated as a place to worship him, then it gets iffy. Specifically, if it's to another god, always bad. So, like, for example, Saul makes a sacrifice at a high place at one point, specifically for God as called by God. However, the tamarisk tree is very rare in that area, and being on a high place, kings would often hold court underneath holy designated places, and trees in the wilderness that are special were often those places.
This just sounds more and more like...
Yeah.
He's got the demon sword, and then there's the ecstatic speech. Now we're gonna go have the high council under the magic tree.
Yeah, and well, no.
Man, ancient world
Deborah
was
does the same
wild.
thing. She sits underneath a tree as the place where people come and receive counsel from her and word from God. Abraham, every time he meets with God, it's near the tree of Moreh or the tree of Meribah, and it's these specific tree places.
Which is why idols are referred to as stumps, because they are bad places of worship.
Exactly.
Yes.
Holy moly. So this joke from like second year in Bible college of a biblical theology of trees might be more legit.
Dude, it's heavily linked to idolatry.
That's
Well,
awesome.
and then you could even link it to atonement, as in, like, finally a tree is given the method to save humanity.
The tree of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the tree of life is, in a way, the tree of death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is so cool.
Yeah. And so...
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So it's... Saul is like, he was near a tree in the same sense when he was counseling with his people while Jonathan went to go fight. And so you've got the same idea where you've got a high place that is probably religiously significant to the Benjaminites because he's in Benjamin at this point.
He addresses them.
And he addresses them. So it's probably their like more holy place that's significant to those people. And he's holding counsel with their leaders at the holy place and saying, hey, what's up? And he's got his spear that he's waiting to use to kill David with.
That he always has on him.
Because he's paranoid. Which is crazy.
He hasn't had it. What is he? 3-0 right now?
He's not very good
Or
at throwing
3-0,
that
sorry.
one spear.
0 for 3.
He's 0 for 3, and he's fighting a guy who's killed 10 times as many people as him.
According to the lyric.
Yep. Okay. Next. You guys ready?
Yeah.
The priests aren't.
Then the king sent to summon Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, and the priests who were at Nob, and all of them came to the king. And Saul said, hear now, son of Ahitub. And he answered, here I am, my lord. And Saul said to him, why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, in that you have given him bread and a sword that has inquired of God for him, and have inquired of God for him, so that he has risen against me to lie in wait as at this day? Then Ahimelech answered the king, and who among all your servants is so faithful as David? And who is the king's son-in-law and captain over your bodyguard, and honored in your house? Is today the first day that I have inquired of God for him? No. Let not the king impute anything to his servant or to all the house of my father, for your servant has known nothing of all of this, much or little. And the king said, you shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house. And the king said to the guard who stood about him, turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David. And they knew that he fled and did not disclose it to me. But the servants of the king would not put out their hand to strike the priests of the Lord. Then the king said to Doeg, you turn and strike to the priests. And Doeg the Edomite turned and struck down the priests, and he killed on that day 85 persons who wore the linen ephod. And Nob, the city of the priests, he put to the sword, both men and women, child and infant, ox and donkey, sheep he put to the sword. But one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar told David, oh, I'm reading past it. Okay, can I say something before we start?
Absolutely.
Saul finally killed a whole city.
Yeah.
He devoted it to destruction.
He devoted it to destruction for his own glory and paranoia.
The priests of God, yeah.
Yeah. No,
Also note that when David asks, "Hey, do you have a sword, a spear, anything?" They're like, "Hey, we have this one sword." They give it to him, and then an army comes, and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna kill everybody. We're gonna kill women, children, sheep, everything." And
But that's
they
the
don't have
point.
a sword or a spear.
But that's my point. Is that Saul's finally
he's
committed
reached
to
his
something.
lowest.
No,
He's reached his lowest.
Not only that he's reached his lowest, this was the sort of thing he was supposed to do when he was obeying God.
Sure.
Like now in his disobedience, he's going fully through with things.
He could not commit to holiness, but he can commit
To sin.
To sin.
The fact that he said the priests are against me and then killed them all.
Not just the priests of the Lord.
Yeah. Or actually, it was the hand of the priests.
Yeah.
But it's also just the court is just like the no, of course
No, we
not.
will not.
And so he has to. So he's leaning on the enemies of Israel to do his bidding.
Mm-hmm.
Where like
The Edomites, descendants of Esau.
Yes.
Just, yeah.
Who later become the Idumeans, which is Herod's people.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the hunting of the anointed one, they kill a whole city. Yeah.
That seems pretty.
Similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. A paranoid king commanding the death of a city after anointed one, a new king that's supposed to replace him.
and Obadiah doesn't have nice words for them after
Yeah.
Babylon comes in and absolutely wrecks
Doeg
ship.
seems like in a TV series, he seems like the parallel villain that is built up alongside the hero that you're going to see a fight later on. Like in this passage. Like if you've read Dune, Fade Routha, the other character who's like raised as the other Messiah figure as opposed to Paul Atreides. Like they eventually have this like one-on-one fight. And they're like raised in parallel.
Yeah. They're presented in parallel.
Yeah.
However, I think this is the last we hear of it,
I know.
isn't it?
It just sounds like it's going to be that.
The idea is that he's brought up as a foil.
Yeah.
Like, in opposition.
Yeah,
okay.
because he's
that'll be more
he's-
understandable than Dune reference.
No, you're right. But like David was the chief of of Saul's bodyguard, and Doeg is the chief of his mercenaries. And so he devotes on command of Saul an entire city to destruction. Like David goes and
a sanctuary
does.
city.
A sanctuary city.
Yeah.
Right, which is the inverse of David going and destroying Philistines on Saul's command.
Right.
And so like you're seeing this like parallel between them, and yeah, it's wild. So cool. Anyways, the last section. But one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. And David said to Abiathar, I knew on that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would surely tell Saul, I have occasioned the death of all of the persons of your father's house. Stay with me. Do not be afraid, for he who seeks my life seeks your life. With me you shall be in safekeeping.
Rough.
Yeah, David does nice stuff like this all the time, where he's like, "Hey, come hang it with me."
That's also a parallel line. So there's two things that have happened here. I just note this is completely separate that are related to the Gospels. So David goes on a trip around Israel and people start accumulating around him the same way that when Jesus goes on his ministry, people start accumulating around him. And then when he's like, the guy's like, I'm afraid because people are hunting me, right? David says, do not be afraid, like Jesus says to people and angels. And he says, for he who seeks my life seeks your life, which is the same as Jesus saying to his disciples, you'll be hunted because I'm hunted. You'll be persecuted because I'm persecuted. And so there's a double parallel there between the people that follow David are being hunted like he's hunted, the same way that followers of Jesus are persecuted the way he's persecuted.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we can't deny the messianic imagery of
Yeah,
David.
no, but I've just never seen like that connection. And like I might have reading a gospel book, but that's very interesting.
Yeah.
And with the political motivation of like he's here to be the new king. He's
Well, it
uprooting
also
king.
means that the lineage of the high priest, the last, at least of relatively close, because they would have other
cousins
priests that can go up and serve. But the closest connection to the high priest, and kind of by default, the next one is in David's entourage.
Mm-hmm.
So you have so he's accumulated first the daughter of Saul, then his son, and his son gives him his all that, his royal cloak, all that kind of stuff. Then the court.
Mm-hmm.
During all that, he has the people, and now the priesthood.
Yeah. And Saul is the reason that all of these people are going to David.
Yeah, and Saul only has foreigners now to do his will.
Yep. He's like a paranoid dictator. Mm-hmm. He's surrounding himself with bad people and slowly isolating himself with a small crowd.
I think the total at this point in the story of Saul's life, we've seen the complete reversal.
Yep.
Between Samuel's bestowing of power upon Saul, when he's just looking for donkeys, right, to now going and slaughtering men of God.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they were in weird idol situations, I don't think that has anything to do with this. In a sanctuary city.
Mm-hmm.
Devotes a place of safety from accusation of crime done. When somebody runs to a sanctuary city, as the law describes, nobody coming to hunt that man can kill him. He has to be proven guilty.
Yeah.
But there was no court. There was
nothing.
That plausible deniability argument was never brought up. It was just that it doesn't matter.
Kills everyone.
And their animals.
And the leadership, which is what he was supposed to do when God commanded him to do that to his enemies. But no, he won't do that to his enemies.
He is unsuccessful because Bucko escapes.
Yeah. He has a problem with finally killing the top dog.
Yeah.
What a guy. What a tragic character.
Yeah, at this point,
he's being an idiot, but
yeah, at this point he is now evil. And he's doing it for pathetic reasons, but it started off like it looked like it was going to be okay. It became tragic. And now he's developing into that villain.
Yeah. What do you think, where do you think Samuel is in all this?
Well, Samuel was in the woods prophesying with his group like 2 pages ago. So he's probably at his
he's just off in the woods doing prophet stuff.
Well, he probably isn't
stuff.
being because we only have the Bible to go off of. He really acts when God tells him to go do something. Mm-hmm. And so he's probably just holding court, doing his job, teaching people how to prophesy, like that whole prophecy school thing.
Because if he knows what's going on, you think he's just praying about it, like, just like, God, what am I supposed to do? What do I do? What do I do?
And God's
saying, just like, you're fine, just keep doing it.
It's okay. The prophet of Gad's got this day.
Yeah, he's in his diocese. You're fine.
Yeah,
unless the prophet of Gad had an assignment from Samuel, but whatever.
Which could very well be.
Yeah,
but I do, because at least in my mind, Samuel's probably losing his mind.
Yeah.
Oh well, he wept because of what Saul was becoming,
and so at this point, he's just, what do I do, God? And there's just nothing as far.
Yeah. Well, it's odd you don't really hear from him in this part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
There's no message to go accuse or save or anything.
Yeah.
And I think here's one thing to say about the lying, right? Is this book is this passage now, we're in the section. We started with Hannah and her husband versus Eli, and then their kids versus each other, Samuel and Eli's sons. And then you had Samuel and Saul, and then we have Saul and David, right? And we're going through that comparison. And I think what you're seeing here is now with a more fleshed out, like, development of that comparison of faithful and unfaithful, is David is, as we're seeing, sinning. Like, we're seeing him commit these sins, so to speak. The lying, the having a house deity thing, idol in his house, maybe, right? He lies a lot. It's very odd. But what you're seeing is that David is constantly affirming the Lord, even though, like, he's praying and returning to God. And that's the difference, is that both are going to be king. Both have been king. Both will have been king. But in David's sin, he returns to God.
Right.
And that's the difference.
Right.
And that because of that, he still has the Holy Spirit. The prophet of Gad, Samuel, are still helping him, right? By God's appointment.
Right.
Is because he's getting help from God because of and because that's what a good king does, that even though you sin, that's what a good man does. Even though you sin, you return to God, not beg for 5 more minutes like Saul does.
Yeah.
But we'll get to this later in Samuel, but there's still consequences for all of this.
Absolutely.
He's still a man of bloodshed and can't fully go into what he is supposed to do to create a temple for the Lord. Like, there are things that he can't complete in his life.
Was that what he was supposed to do? Or is
I
that
don't know
what
if he was
desires?
supposed to do. That's what he desired to do.
Because God says, I have one after you.
Yeah.
Your son will build the temple.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And looking at it that way, Solomon and David just have such different kind of like character profiles. It's kind of hard to imagine them as father and son.
Yeah.
You know?
They're
They're so disconnected.
David is the like hardworking farmer, and his son is went to college to become a biologist.
Yeah. Did something in the humanities for sure.
Well, it's like because he had all the animals transported to him so he could like study them, like, and
For divination.
yes,
I don't know.
well, he had some gorillas sent to him.
What?
Yeah, it mentions that he had gorillas sent to him from Africa because of the Queen of Sheba.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's not in scripture though, is it?
Yeah. It says he had like of all the like the people sending him stuff, he got gorillas and like various birds from various places.
They'd probably die right away though, right?
I mean,
I don't know.
put them in some cages.
Man, what a wild thing to see for the first time.
Solomon had a gorilla. Anyways,
That's so cool. I didn't know that.
yeah.
Are we close to wrapping it up, guys, or anything else you guys wanted to add before we put?
I'm excited for the next chapters.
What's next week? Give us a hint.
Next chapter. Let me go to it. Dun. Next on Samuel. Next we have David saves the city of Kyla, and David spares Saul's life. And then sadly, the death of Samuel is coming up close.
Yeah, but we knew he wasn't going to make it. On account of it being thousands of years ago.
20
years at
29
least. It was more than 20 years ago.
2,900 years ago? 2,800 years ago?
I mean,
You only put
That
David's
doesn't-
900 years, 900 BC?
The kingdom of Israel falls in 740.
and Saul is instated in 1100.
Saul stayed in 1100. So, yeah, 1,000 years.
Yeah, I usually
Yeah,
put it near
3,000.
1,000, but I know that's a more conservative estimate.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
The distance between David and Jesus is less than half of the time between us and Jesus.
That's weird to think about too.
Israel
It's
existed.
less than half the time.
Yeah. Sorry, like is half the time. than between
Oh,
us and
yes,
Jesus.
okay.
Yeah.
Only
And-
1,000 years. is
Well, no,
what he
the
said.
distance between Abraham and Jesus is the same as between Jesus and us.
Yes.
Again, maybe. I don't know.
Because if Moses is at 1500 and the
Yeah.
400-year thing is
It's legit.
And
It's
the Earth
legit.
is only 6,000 years old, right?
no,
Josh?
no.
That's what this means.
No.
That's what this means.
No.
I counted.
And the,
Are you saying it's not?
I used my
they
fingers.
found a plaque in Lebanon
They found plaque. They had
recently
dentists in Lebanon
that says
old?
Abraham, Isaac.
that says 10,000 BC, so take that.
No, there's a plaque that says Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were here.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, in
It
Lebanon.
just- Man, they got around.
Yeah, north of Canaan. Yeah. Well, Joel,
Yeah.
what do we do?
I don't know. Hang out. We are on the internet. SecondRateSaints.com. I was gonna goof it up. I'm sorry.
We
I feel like
hang
I
out-
haven't ruined this episode enough, so I've got to do something.
Hey,
We're
Joel,
at secondRateSaints.com. We have a chat feature there. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can use that. If you'd like to email us a longer form question, we've got secondRateSaints@gmail.com. If you'd like to follow updates for what we're doing, Instagram and Twitter are probably the best ways to do that. Check out our blog post, book reviews, and other shenanigans all over at our website. Have a great week, and we'll, continue our march into the United
future.
Kingdom.
March into the kingdom? That's awesome.
March into United
Joel.
Kingdom.
Joel,
What?
you don't ruin episodes. You make episodes.
Yeah, I guess.
Anyways,
I'm
bye.
gonna end it.
I don't want to do it. Man, this went nowhere.